Full Metal Brotherhood is, as the title says, a story about brotherhood. Edward and Alphonse Elric learn the hardest lessons of their lives as they try to use alchemy to bring a loved one back to life. In the process, Alphonse ends up losing his entire body, while Edward does what he can to keep his brother's soul in the material world. Of course, what they have done is a blunder, and they must reverse it at any cost. For this, Edward ends up burning the bridge, and the two brothers set out on a journey to restore their bodies. However, Alphonse lives a life of great risk, both mentally and physically, as his soul is bound to his suit of armor. He can spend an eternity alive if they fail. He can lose his life in just a few seconds if someone wipes out his blood seal. His life is plagued by uncertainties, and the fact that their country is on the verge of experiencing genocide doesn't help either. In today's video, we will discuss what led Alphonse Elric to a journey of restoring his body, the struggles of his unusual anatomy, and how he was able to overcome it all. Alphonse Elric's descent into a life of darkness. Alphonse Elric is the deuteragonist of Full Metal Alchemist, and his state of being drives the narrative from the perspective of the protagonist, Edward Elric, and the audience alike. He is the younger brother of the protagonist and meets with a terrifying fate early in the show. The boys had been abandoned by their father, while their mother lost her life while they were quite young. Growing up as kids with a deep interest in alchemy, the brothers tried to bring their mother back. However, such a feat was considered to be impossible. A life lost is a life lost, and no amount of alchemy could change that. And there's a reason for that. Alchemy operates by following the law of equivalent exchange. To get something of a set value, you need to give something of equal value. This was possible in the case of transmuting metals or fixing broken electronics. However, putting value on a life wasn't possible. Even if you paid for life with life itself, it wouldn't weigh out on the scales, since every life differs in value. The act of performing alchemy to revive a human, that is, human transmutation, is also considered to be extremely taboo, and yet the brothers performed it by using their blood, which was not nearly enough to bring a human back. As a result, Alphonse had his entire physical body snatched away, while Edward lost an arm and a leg. The end product was the revival of a humanoid creature that was more like a zombie and much less like their mother. In fact, it was revealed in a later episode that what they had transmuted was genetically far different from their mother, and that the brothers had gone through hell for nothing. It didn't take much time for young Edward to realize that they had caused a disaster and that reviving their mother was impossible. The least he could do was save his brother. Partaking in such a taboo also allowed the Elric brothers to see the Gate of Alchemy, or the Gate of Truth, to a certain extent. This gate held the secrets and infinite knowledge pertaining to alchemy. The gate was also being guarded by a being called Truth, who is pretty much like God in the story. Truth and the gate are responsible for holding alchemists accountable for paying their share of the exchange. Anyone who witnessed the gate gained access to knowledge about alchemy that was unattainable for anyone who never broke the taboo. However, they always lost something of great value to gain this knowledge. Following this blunder of epic proportions, Edward was able to strike a hasty negotiation where he sacrificed his right arm and left leg to get Alphonse's soul back. He then created a blood seal on a nearby metal armor and bound Alphonse's soul to it, creating the iconic image of a human without a body who had his soul bound to metal. The two then set off, and we get to witness the epic journey of the Elric brothers as Edward decides to get his hand on the legendary Philosopher's Stone to restore Alphonse's body. This stone was the only thing that allowed one to perform alchemy without having to follow the law of equivalent exchange, and as long as the law applied to them, the brothers could never get their original bodies back. Interestingly, the title of the show, Full Metal Alchemist, sounds like it's referring to Alphonse, as he is an alchemist whose entire body is a massive steel or metal suit of armor. Within the show, the phrase is used to refer to Edward Elric, who gains name and fame for being a prodigy in alchemy, although he is only partially made of metal, which compensates for his lost arm and leg. However, characters often mistake Alphonse for being the Full Metal Alchemist because he is entirely made of metal and towers over everyone. This is also a running gag throughout the show, alongside Edward's height or the lack thereof. However, it is not like Edward is the only Elric who uses alchemy. Prior to losing his body, Alphonse was deeply embedded in alchemy as well. Together, the brothers trained under Master Alchemist Izumi Curtis, who had tried to perform human transmutation in the past to revive her stillborn child. Although she failed to do so, she did gain access to the Gate of Alchemy back then and acquired the ability to perform alchemy without using transmutation circles, much like the Elric brothers. She did have to give up some pretty key internal organs organs as a part of the gate toll, however. She had also helped the boys train their bodies, due to which Alphonse, as a human, was physically quite fit. In fact, he was a much better hand-to-hand combatant than Edward, and could go against armed opponents or people who practiced martial arts. Edward even confessed how he had never been able to beat Alphonse in a physical fight. Although Edward was widely known as a genius, Alphonse was not too far from the title either. A prodigy when it came to academics and studies of alchemy, chemistry, and biology, and a genius when it came to IQ, Alphonse was more than capable of standing tall in a battle of wits against his brother. He also had great skill with words, boasted encyclopedic knowledge, and could solve complex alchemy-related mysteries and puzzles. However, the one thing that set Edward apart was his ability to hyper-focus on a topic of interest. In a way, Alphonse was more intellectually balanced and was also great at networking and social interaction. When it came to alchemy, Alphonse possessed great attention to detail, which was something he learned while being taught by Izumi Curtis. He often used his alchemic abilities amidst combat for physical augmentation of power. He even crafted weapons from his armor, increased the potency of his melee strikes, and altered his immediate surroundings to create a domain that gave him the upper hand in battle. He didn't need a transmutation circle to perform alchemy like Edward and Izumi, but he had another cool thing going for himself. Alphonse could manipulate matter without having to touch it. This was probably because he didn't have a physical body that could touch matter, and instead he was a soul. As such, he was not confined within his skin. It's funny how his loss of physical freedom ironically gave him more alchemical freedom. A body of steel is a blessing in battle, but a curse in life. Alphonse was able to retain his physical abilities even as a soul lost in the armor. A body of steel also gave him a tremendous physical advantage, as it increased his offensive and defensive abilities while making him immune to bullets. He never ran out of stamina or suffered from extreme temperatures, as he did not have a real living body. This was of great benefit when the boys went to Fort Briggs at the northern border, which was a place that was covered in snow. However, he did have a great weakness in the blood seal, which, if washed out or wiped off, would break the connection between the soul and the body. This seal was an alchemic rune drawn using Edward's blood. He didn't need to eat, breathe, or sleep either, which may not sound like much, but it was very mentally draining for him. A conscience that was always active without rest. A body that never felt hungry and couldn't enjoy the joys of eating despite wanting to. A body that could never feel the warmth, neither of the sun nor from other people. Being in a suit of metal was a very depressing experience for Alphonse, who would often write down the names of food he wanted to try after getting his body back. The one food he was most excited to try out was Winry Rockbell's apple pie. Alphonse was very emotionally sensitive and kind. For a boy like him to be stripped of the ability to feel human touch was quite emotionally saddening as well. Although he tried his best to hold himself together, the show had often shown Alphonse struggling with his condition, which quite literally made him a shell of a person. He suffered as a result of the tragedies that plagued his life, the uncertainty of not knowing whether he would get his body back, the fear of having the blood seal wiped off, the desire to experience human warmth, the danger of never being able to experience closeness again, and the constant suspicion of being an anomaly and not a human. Alphonse faced it all. He even spent some time not remembering what he had learned when he saw the Gate of Truth, as he repressed his traumatic memories. It took him some time to come around. However, the hardest pain for Alphonse was how he blamed himself for his mother's transmutation failing and for his brother having to lose limbs to keep his soul attached. He even blamed himself for his brothers setting out on an impossible journey to restore their bodies, for which they burned down their entire house so they could simultaneously never look back again and erase a place where they had committed an act that had ruined their lives. While Edward hated being made fun of for being short, Alphonse disliked having his large size pointed out. He didn't want to be reminded that he was inhuman in more ways than one. He preferred it when people took his personality into account and treated him like a child. On the bright side, he had been using his armor to hold weapons and hide others, including small cats he had picked up from the streets. One of Greed's underlings once hid inside Alphonse to protect himself from Wrath or King Bradley. Unfortunately, that situation ended with Bradley sticking his sword through the eye opening in Alphonse's armor, killing. In the subsequent scene, blood visibly gushed out of all of the openings in the armor. Where is Alphonse's body? Is it possible to get it back? In one episode, Edward was able to access the Gate of Alchemy once again, where he got to see what was on the other side of it. Nothing could have prepared him for what he saw next. It was Alphonse's original body. His blonde hair had grown out over the years, and his body was visibly malnourished, with the ribs being super prominent. Edward wished to be able to take Alphonse back with him to the physical world. However, he could not do so, as Alphonse mentioned how he could not return if he did not come across his own own soul. Edward tried to run to him, but he was held back by the black, wriggly arms crawling out of the gate. Before leaving the domain, he asked Alphonse to wait, as he would come back to get it. However, the story of Full Metal Alchemist went far beyond two brothers trying to get their bodies back. We found a central antagonist with Father, who wished to attain godhood. He had previously sacrificed a nation and used the souls of the people to become a living Philosopher's Stone. He wished to do something similar in Amestris, which is the Elric brothers' home country, once again on the day of an eclipse. Meanwhile, the brothers, on their search for the Philosopher's Stone and as state alchemists, experienced their fate and paths becoming intertwined with that of Father and the homunculi. The military had also fallen under Father's minions, which led to a greater meshing of the two plots. The very place where they could find a Philosopher's Stone was the very establishment that wished to use them to sacrifice Amestris. The boys never expected the Philosopher's Stone to be something that was created by orchestrating human massacres. This also meant that they were reluctant to use it if it meant that they would have to sacrifice thousands of lives to get their bodies back. However, when one of their allies, Ling from the eastern nation of Xing, ended up consensually giving his body to the homunculus Greed, the Elric brothers were able to get the details of what the homunculi and Father were planning. This led to them learning about Father intending to open the Gate of Truth on the promised day. This meant that the brothers would gain access to their bodies without having to be the ones to cause human massacres. On the promised day, Father did manage to access the Gate of Truth once again when he absorbed truth, the lives of 50 million people, and became someone greater than God himself. However, Hohenheim was able to use the Eastern practice of alchemy to take away the power of the souls from Father's body, leaving him vulnerable. His body began to crumble as the vessel weakened and could not hold his godlike power. Meanwhile, an injured Edward caught Father's eye, who rushed to him to use his life to power him up. Unfortunately, Edward had his left arm impaled under the rubble and couldn't move away in time, which left him pinned to his spot. To protect him, Alphonse sacrificed himself and exchanged his soul for Edward's original right arm. Although a tragic move, it only motivated Edward further against Father and for retrieving Alphonse, since he was now completely sure it was possible to bring his brother back in flesh and blood. In the end, Edward was able to restore Alphonse's soul to his body, bringing him back to the physical world. In exchange, however, he had to give away his alchemical prowess and knowledge as part of the law of equivalent exchange. Marvelous verdict. Alphonse's relationship with his armored body is a great example of how strength and invulnerability isn't everything. For a human being to experience the joy of living, the body is as important as the mind. Yes, it is necessary to have a healthy mindset that pushes you towards the light, but some of our greatest memories are born from experiences we would never have had without our physical senses. The joy of petting a dog, eating a cake, feeling the wind, or from getting almost 10 hours of uninterrupted sleep are often the little things that make human life on Earth so valuable. We see Alphonse struggle daily due to his anatomy cutting him off from such joys, and it isn't something the likes of bullet invulnerability can compensate. With that, today's video comes to an end. What did you think of Alphonse Elric? Did you enjoy this video? If so, then don't forget to like and comment down below. Until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.